Tensions escalated Wednesday at the University of California, Irvine, as a few hundred pro-Palestinian protesters entered the physical sciences lecture hall, barricaded it, and surrounded the building. School officials called for help from the Irvine Police Department and the Orange County Sheriff's Department. 47 individuals were arrested, some for failure to disperse and some for trespassing. Among the total number of arrests, 19 individuals were not affiliated with the university. 2 were school employees and 26 were students. Authorities were seen putting protesters in zip ties and escorting them away from the main protest area. Chancellor Howard Gilman said in a letter to the community Thursday, quote, "I was prepared to allow a peaceful encampment to exist on the campus without resorting to police intervention, even though the encampment violated our policies and the existence of the encampment was a matter of great distress to other members of our community. And so after weeks, when the encampers assured our community that they were committed to maintaining a peaceful and non-disruptive encampment, it was terrible to see that they would dramatically alter the situation in a way that was a direct assault on the rights of other students and the university mission." In this video screenshot, as reported by ABC News, you can see pro-Palestinian demonstrators standing in front of a line of police as they cleared an encampment at the UC-Irvine campus. Police took down barricades from the encampment and people were asked to leave the building. Protesters entered the physical sciences lecture hall at 2:30 p.m. approximately, according to the university. Classes for the rest of the day were canceled and school officials urged anyone in the area to evacuate until further notice. UCI said classes on Thursday would be remote. Wednesday's unrest comes amid weeks of protests breaking out at universities across the country, calling for institutions to divest from companies that financially support Israel. On Tuesday, UC Chief Investment Officer Jagdeep Singh Bhakner announced that investments from companies that students are targeting in their call for divestment represent $32 billion, which is nearly 1/5 of the UC system's overall assets. Last month, the University of California president said the institutions would not boycott or divest from Israel, nor do I believe that they should personally, because if you're there protesting for peace and for an end to the war, that should be what your protesting is about, and not about investments in a country that needs to thrive like any country that's not punishing the government, that's punishing the people. That's my opinion on that. Cenk, curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah. Pausing here to deliver some honest truth, as we do in our news coverage as well. TYT is facing challenges, guys, as the entire industry is. You know who could make the difference? You. If you hit the join button below, it's gonna make all the difference and keep us in business. We appreciate you, thank you. Unsurprisingly, I don't agree. So we've had these conversations before. So let me break it down in a couple of ways. First of all, to all the student protesters out there, I got nothing but love for you guys. Thank you for fighting for peace, for the lives of Palestinians, especially when you're not Palestinian or Muslim. Whether you're atheist, Christian, or a lot of the protesters are Jewish in some of these protests, I love you all. Thank you for doing it. In the case of UC-Irvine and Hamilton Hall in Columbia, so there is this issue there where you're taking up space, there's no question about it, and somebody does eventually have to do something in regards to that. So my point on that is, first of all, the framing of the leader of UC-Irvine there was, it's an assault on other people's rights. Nonsense, there's no assault. They're just trying to make all the protesters seem like they're violent when they're not violent. But they do have to be, if you occupy a place at some point, like a classroom, not a public place like the grass at Columbia, but you go into Hamilton Hall, you go into a classroom, you do have to be physically removed. And I would think that a small fine would be the right way to go there, as opposed to an arrest that goes on your record, et cetera. And I have experience with this because I did civil disobedience to get money out of politics in the largest civil disobedience in Capitol history. We were on the Capitol steps, and eventually the cops came and zip tied us and took us down to headquarters, and we got a small fine. I think that's the right way to do it. You make your point now.
But that is an arrest.
Yeah, so, but there's different forms of arrest. So does it go on your permanent record? What does it mean to go on your permanent record? And sometimes jurisdictions matter, right? So I don't think the ones that are in public areas that are not impeding or blocking anyone should be arrested at all. I get it when you take over a building, okay? Now, having said that, we saw that all the hubbub on cable news about, oh my God, these protesters are viciously anti-Semitic. 99% bupkis, overwhelmingly peaceful, and Ben and I could get into the conversation about UCLA, the pro-Israel extremists in that case were the ones that were violent, still not arrested. I love the boycott, divest, and sanction movement now. Before I was not sure. Now after Gaza, I'm positive. And part of the reason, Ben, and we'll get Jackson in, and then I'll let Ben respond, is that look, the occupation is 57 years, and it's unbearable. In my opinion, it's 5.5 million hostages that Israel's keeping. I think the UN should unilaterally declare Palestine a state, as they did with Israel. I think we should all put economic pressure, the most effective pressure, on Israel. It's not because we hate Israel, it's because we want Israel to do better. And once this war, and most importantly the occupation, is over, then of course you lift BDS, and we welcome Israel into the League of Nations, and, well, in a matter of speaking, and Palestine as well. So I want both of them to be beautiful, prosperous nations.
Well, I think it's definitely a positive sign to not just see the youth in the country taking an interest in politics domestically, but also an interest in where our money is going and how it's being spent. And I think that it's important that universities, because it's pretty clear that these protests on college campuses are going to continue, I think it's important that universities prepare themselves for it in a positive way, to where they can be like, look, we support our students' right to protest and their right to free speech. And if UC-Irvine, they mentioned that they aren't gonna divest, then perhaps the students can do like how a lot of people in political parties do, like in the Democratic Party, for instance. Like a lot of the youth vote, for instance, be like, no, we're not gonna vote for Joe Biden. If it's possible, then maybe a lot of those students could leave and go to another university. And I know that that's not just easy to 1, 2, 3 and just leave, but just in a sense of, like, what are the moves that people could take if they're serious about their political stances? Continue to organize. Because I think anybody who's reasonable can understand, like, if you blocking pathways or you're in a building, I think people who participate in those protests probably somewhat expect that they're going to get arrested or at least removed in some form or fashion. But the rhetoric behind it, like these kids who were like 18, 19, 21 years old, when you're 25 or something, when your frontal lobes develop. So, and I say that to say not that, they're kids and they don't know what they're talking about, but, if that's the truth, then how can we just be like, oh, they're just anti-Semitic? Like, we got to give them some grace at least. You can't have it both ways. But to me, I just feel like it's students who are demonstrating their rights. That's my take on it.
So I've so much to say on that. So yes, as many of you know, I was at the UCLA protests on the night when the violence broke out. And I was driving home and I heard on the news it was breaking out, and I went and I wanted to check it out, and I was there covering it from as objective as I could be, obviously having a dog in the fight, but from a reporter's standpoint, talking to people on both sides. And I condemned things I heard on both sides during my live broadcasts. And yes, I totally grant you, Cenk, that night it was a really bad look from the pro-Israeli side. Most of the violence that I witnessed, I was very sad to see, did come from the pro-Israeli side. There was no doubt also some random agitators there. There was people in Halloween Michael Myers masks that were trying to hit people with sticks. There was definitely pepper spray being sprayed from the pro-Palestinian encampment. Some of it got in my throat and choked me up on 2 different occasions. But yes, punches that I saw thrown came first from the Israeli side, or the pro-Israeli side, and it was a terrible thing to see. On the flip side, I do not agree that these protests are about peace purely. I do not see that at all, because again, I do not hear their mission, their purpose, their arguments, their chants being about peace, being about a 2-sided ceasefire, being about releasing hostages and the terrorists of Hamas surrendering along with their demands of the Israeli government. If you're about stopping death, it's not about economic investments, and let's also make that our goal. We're gonna keep protesting until the economic investment in the one Jewish nation on earth is removed. It should be until the innocent deaths stop. And as I that night asked, kind of in a very precarious place, because I was in the line of a lot of violence and things being thrown back and forth, asked the Palestinian the pro-Palestinian protesters, why alongside asking for Israel to stop the assault of the way they're carrying out their war, why they don't also call on Hamas to surrender and to release the hostages, and they have nothing to say. They don't respond to that. And then on top of that, across all of these campus protests, when you hear calls for, we don't want 2 states, we want all of it, we don't want 2 states, we want 48. When you hear globalize the intifada revolution is the only way, and those are incredibly charged terms with history of violence behind them. That is not a way to speak of peace, to call for peace, and to make people think that your aims are peaceful, let alone blocking Jewish students or Jewish professors from walking to where they're trying to go. And so I don't think it's that black and white at all. And I think lastly, before I would love to hear your response, and I'm sure you have one, is I also, as you know, vehemently disagree that this has been 75 years of occupation.
57.
Like 57 years of occupation, sorry, since you said you want the UN to do unilaterally what they did with Israel for a Palestinian state. That means you acknowledge that what they did then is valid for Israel, and immediately after that, Israel was attacked, as you well know, by many Arab nations surrounding, and then again, and then again, and that is what leads to the necessity of the only Jewish nation on earth following a Holocaust where the entire population was almost eradicated, what necessitated them to fight back when your nation is attacked, and against all odds won. A fledgling brand new nation was able to win, and in war you gain territory, and that territory has been offered back many times, and that has not been accepted, and instead promises of death and destruction and terrorism have continued, and actual actions and suicide bombings and attacks, and then October 7th. And so how is a nation supposed to ever feel comfortable with allowing complete free movement or autonomy from people led by groups that are promising terrorism? That's just facts that can't be avoided.
Yeah, so I don't want to relitigate everything, and Ben and I have debated this on the show many, many times. I'll go as quickly as I can, especially on 1948. There's no way I'm relitigating that. It's over. Israel exists, it has a right to exist, and so does Palestine. And we need a 2-state solution. Any talk of 1 state, neither side, is madness and will lead to forever wars.
100% agree.
Hey, we won the territorial war. Yeah, I've heard that before from the Ottoman Empire, which used to occupy Palestine before Israel did, and that's not the direction we want to go in world history. I want to be fair to the pro-Israel side, because that's why I call them pro-Israel extremists at UCLA, because not everybody on the pro-Israel side is characterized by the same things that those guys happen to do. So let's be fair to everybody. And Ben did try to bring down hateful speech on all sides when he was there, and I commend him for doing that. I think that I have not seen, I saw one video at Columbia of a human chain about a so-called Zionist. That really bothered me. Other than that, I haven't seen any Jewish student or professor be blocked specifically, and I've now talked to both family members and friends who are on these college campuses, and they say, no, they're blocking everyone in certain situations, not just Jewish students. That makes a huge, huge difference. If you're blocking everyone because you're doing civil disobedience, no problem, in my opinion. Obviously there'll be some of the consequences I explained earlier, right? But if you're just blocking Jewish students or professors, totally unacceptable. And then, look, guys, are these protests shutting down the protests because they're legitimately worried about violence or the rights of other students or anti-Semitism? Well, Washington Post just had a story about no. A lot of the donors that for Mayor Eric Adams in New York, and some at Columbia were coordinating with the Israeli government, and they didn't want protests of Israel, just like I suspected and talked to you guys about. And I know you could get into nuances, and it's possible that you don't want any criticism of Israel and you're worried about anti-Semitism. That's also possible. And then finally, I think that the most productive way to go, guys, is what Brown and some of the other universities did, where admittedly they kicked the can down the road, but at least in the case of Brown, and everybody, all the different universities handled it in slightly different ways. But they diffused it by saying, okay, we will either consider, or in the case of Brown, actually have the Board of Trustees vote on divesting from Israel. Now my guess is that they're gonna vote no, but at least it puts them to a vote, and it diffuses the situation in a way where the protesters got something. And I love that they're pushing out this message of enough, 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 enough crushing of the Palestinians, enough of the occupation, enough of this war. and we demand action, and we don't want our tax dollars going towards it. We don't want our university's money, endowment, et cetera, being invested in that direction. I think that's healthy. I think a vote on it is healthy, and that's political and the much better way to go than anything physical.
I agree with most of what you said, and I think that was very eloquently said. Do you not think that it would be beneficial, as I feel like I've always tried to acknowledge missteps on the pro-Israeli side, and I criticize the extremists on that side. Do you think it would not be helpful if the protesters on the pro-Palestinian side chose slogans and chants that were not calling at least obliquely for violence, and that made it a little bit two-sided? If they acknowledge that both sides in their eyes are problems, why only focus on the Israeli side and not say also the clear terrorists should step down and end this? When you don't make it both sides, to me it seems very much you are trying to galvanize anger towards one side and not actually trying to achieve the goal of peace.
Yeah, Ben, I think that a lot of people are aware that I'm one of the few people, in my opinion, whether you guys decide on your own, that is not hypocritical on this issue. So some things are debatable, like intifada means uprising. So the Palestinians need some sort of uprising. I hope it's not a violent one. That's why I call for a diplomatic one and a peaceful one, and one that's revolving around either the economy or going to the United Nations. So we can argue about the word intifada, but I've said from the river to the seas that not a good idea. It's a wrong chant, don't do it. And I said that to the Palestinian side, and I got a lot of pushback on it. But then when Netanyahu said from the river to the sea, I'm principled. And I said, look, I said it was wrong on the Palestinian side, and it's wrong when Netanyahu says it, especially because Netanyahu is actually doing it, right? And so that's fair. So do you agree Netanyahu saying it is terrible and implies genocide just like the other side?
I do not think it implies genocide. I do think it was bad choice of words very much, but the very difference being, the reason it's bad on the Palestinian side is because by saying that, you're saying you want to get rid of the people currently there, the Israeli people. By Netanyahu saying for the river to the sea, we're not going to allow that, is saying we're just not going to allow the genocide promised by the other side. That's what he's saying. You can use the words as long as it's not the chant, but it shouldn't have been said. It was incendiary, it was stupid, and I'm no fan of Netanyahu, I've said many times. I think he's a real problem, and I think it was excellent that his defense minister, Yoav Gallant, called him out this week and said it's ridiculous and insane that he has refused time and again to come up with any plan for the day after, because and to be playing games with maybe Israel will take over governance of Gaza. That would be an occupation. That would be a return to pre-2005 when they left Gaza, and that would not be okay. That is not okay. And so I absolutely stand with forcing him to finally grow up here and have a plan for the day after. Netanyahu says that the day after doesn't matter until Hamas is done, and that's insane also to say, because the day it's done, that begins, and then you don't have a plan. So have a plan to get us towards peace, towards a Palestinian state eventually, towards peace in this area, so that we can finally all live together. We're all cousins, we're all brothers, we're all related, and let's finally act like it.
Yeah, I love that. You guys have now heard all of our opinions. We're good on it, and I just want to double down on. We're all cousins. Come on, guys. It's so obvious we're cousins. Please, let's move on. Let's get to 2 states and solve this thing forever.
I actually got to tell you an amazing anecdote for 2 seconds that happened as I was walking up to the UCLA protest. You're gonna love this story. I'm walking up there and I can't find it. I don't know where it is. And I see these 2 guys who also can't find it. So I say, the guy goes, I guess we're gonna find it together. We start walking together. These 2 guys with beards, I have a beard. We start looking at each other side by side walking, me and this one guy. And he says to me, where are you from? And I go, LA. Where are you from? He goes, LA. He goes, where are you originally from? I go, whatever, man. He goes, we don't have to be weird about it. I'm Palestinian. I go, I'm Israeli. As we're walking to the protest side by side. And he says, I'm not usually political, but this is so hard what's going on. And to be honest with you, I love my Israeli brothers. I'm from Bethlehem, but I spent great times in Israel. My Israeli friends asked me to go to the Palestinian hookah shop because they have the best tobacco there. And I said, I've had great times in Bethlehem as well. And we just joked around, and as we were walking, we totally bonded, we got along great. I shot some video of it that I probably should post. And it just again shows that until we get pulled into these political battles where we lose our humanity, we're the same, we're all together, and that's what we need to focus on a lot more.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.